Breaking the lockdown curfew is one thing, but drag racing after hours is a whole other crime. And Cape Town's traffic officials have their hands full trying to catch these culprits speeding at all hours of the night. Natalie Malgas is tailing this story and joins us live now. Natalie, it's been going on in Cape Town for a while, and not only is it a nuisance for the people who are in the neighborhoods where the drag racing is happening, it's also dangerous. There was an incident, I think a year or two ago, where there was a driver who lost his legs.
And if you ask the neighbors who live on the roads or close to the roads of these drag racing hotspots, Tafuma, you'll hear that it's a massive nuisance. It keeps them up at night and they're constantly flagging it with authorities. So just this weekend, we tagged along with the phantom officers of the Ghost Squad to monitor those exact hotspots, especially because it's a long weekend. They were acting on tip-offs and monitoring where any of these illegal racing and dicing may happen. In fact, we're standing on a bridge just over the N1 highway, and it's on this exact bridge where we're told officers say scouts will position themselves monitoring the roadway, and when things clear up, usually at night, when things clear up just enough for the races to begin, they give their signals and the races kind of happen. It's on hotspots like the N1, on Robert Sobukwe and on Jakes Gerwel that we spent most of our night on Saturday evening into the early hours of Sunday just monitoring and lapping across the city to make sure that all things are quiet. It did help a little that there was some mist that acted as a deterrent, but the Ghost Squad, traffic officers and other law enforcement will remain on high alert throughout this long weekend.
So are they winning the battle against the drag racers? The authorities, they've said that they're not able to keep up with the different spots where these guys are able to go to.
There is some difficulty in trying to police these illegal dicers and drag races because it's quite literally a moving target. And as soon as they get the tip-offs, the law enforcement rolls in, and by that time everything's packed up and everyone's dispersed. So what law enforcement is trying to do here in the city is to regulate it, to have conversations with those who are organizing these illegal events, to make it more legal and a little bit more structured, by using facilities that are already up and running, like Killarney, for example, so that things can be more regulated and safety mechanisms can be instituted and monitored. So at the moment, those illegal races still happen, and unfortunately it remains a nuisance for many residents living on the hotspots that I mentioned a short while ago. But enforcement agencies are trying their best to engage with those who are conducting these illegal practices to make things a little bit more regulated and legal.
Natalie, I was under the impression that they had opened up sites like Killarney for the drag races. So that hasn't happened yet, or does it happen and it's a limited time, and so they feel that, well, outside of those hours they have to go onto the streets?
It certainly is up and running, and it is a function that exists. It's in fact one of the partnerships that the city is most proud of. We did speak to Alderman J.P. Smith of the Safety and Security portfolio here in the local council. That is one of the structures that currently exists. But there's a lot of money, excitement and adrenaline in the illegal practice of dicing and drag racing, and those entities still exist parallel to the legal structures that are currently in place. The idea is to enforce fully and to engage with those who are still doing these illegal practices to make sure that everything is as safe and regulated as possible. In fact, this is what J.P. Smith had to say.
This COVID fatigue, I think you see that people are now have scant interest in the COVID regulations. They're not bothering anymore. And it's hard. You need to issue a great many fines every night to deal with all the curfew breakers. And it's gotten to the point where that enforcement activity, the amount of energy and time it consumes to enforce, is perhaps not viable or productive relative to all the other challenges that we face. But you saw tonight the Traffic Department, Metro Police, law enforcement, SAPS are doing as much as they can whilst dealing with the land invasions and the taxi violence and the threats of looting and all the other stuff that eats up resources. But ultimately, it's up to the public to help us.
So, Natalie, I think part of bringing about change is, I guess, understanding why the drag racers do what they do. Has there been any conversation with those people involved about what this means to them and what would get them to stop the illegal activity?
Those are part of the conversations that city law enforcers are having with those who are organizing these illegal events. It's largely down to the adrenaline of it, knowing that you're going to do this under the cloak of darkness, and sometimes in view of the law enforcement, because there are cameras all across the city and particularly on these hotspot routes. So these are some of the things that law enforcement is discussing with those organizing these illegal events. But at the moment, there's been no breakthrough to convince those organizing these illegal events to cut it altogether.